So we're very privileged to have a great speaker this afternoon, and I'm unfortunately privileged of named Julie and I. We just heard him speak in Sioux Falls about a month ago, so it's wonderful to see him. Father Robert Spitzer is a Catholic priest who was ordained June 11th, 1983 in the Society of Jesus, and took final vows April 4th, 1992. He has been the president of the Magis Center of Reason and Faith since 2010. The Magis Center produces documentaries, books, high school programs, college courses, adult education programs, and social media materials on the close connections among science, reason, and faith. Father Spitzer is also the president, master of ceremonies, and speaker at the Napa Institute. He is an author of many books, including Finding True Happiness, Satisfying Our Restless Hearts, and The Science of Happiness. He is the host of the weekly EWTN television program, Father Spitzer's Universe, that discusses faith, science, philosophy, and culture. Father Spitzer is an educator who founded colleagues in Jesuit business education, Healing the Culture in Seattle, and University Faculty for Life at Georgetown University. As founder and president since 1996 of the Spitzer Center, Denver, he developed and tested his model of purpose of life called the 4 Levels of Happiness. He has delivered it to hundreds of audiences of international and national government officials, professionals, businesses, laity, and students. I present to you Father Robert Spitzer.
You're going to do it. Thank you. Great. Thanks so much. Oh, great. Great. Got it. Thank you so much for the warm welcome, and I hope I can give you a lot of truth today, because I think the Catholic Church has a lot of it, and it's probably the only truths that will save our culture. But before we begin, I must pray in the name of the Father, of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Heavenly Father, send your Holy Spirit down upon us all this day, so that everything I say and we hear will be brought to fruition in your will for the good of your people, your church, and your kingdom, unto our salvation and the salvation of those we touch, asking all of these things through Jesus our Lord. Amen. And Mary, seat of wisdom, pray for us. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Well, today I know many of you know me for my books on faith and science. I'm not doing that today. I'm going to be talking about moral truths today, because I think it's very, very urgent. And in this time of elections, I just want to say, please listen to this material and share it with as many friends as you can, and see if you can influence people to look at pro-life in a different way, and to look at transgenderism in a different way. The Catholic Church has so much light, so much truth. All I want to do is tell you just the bare substance of it, so deep as it is, and then hopefully we can begin to make a change in our culture, which if it doesn't, honestly, I'm not really a cynical, skeptical guy, but we're heading on a track to implosion, and worrying me a little bit. So I'll just say that and get on with the talk here. First, I'm going to split the talk into 2 parts. The first part I'm going to talk about are justice issues that nobody else recognizes except the Catholic Church and a few of our cohorts that agree with us and help us in this regard. And secondly, I'm going to be talking about sexual issues, which nobody thinks is a real big deal in our culture, but really are very big deals in our culture. And of course, both of these issues, have a great deal to do with the future of our culture, the future of our kids. So let me just, start with the justice issues. There are 4 of them, which are truly important. And I'm going to say this right now. The popular culture has certainly claimed the moral high ground on the Catholic Church. And people really not only dislike the Catholic Church, but really resent and sometimes hate the Catholic Church for its stand on transgenderism, or its stand on abortion, or its stand on a homosexual lifestyle, etc. what I hope to say is that truly is unwarranted. And in fact, the church does have the light of the truth, which comes from Jesus Christ. So let's begin with abortion. And I have, if you go to magiscenter.com, magiscenter.com, you get the full blend of these articles. This article that you can just get on Magis Center is called The Declaration on the Inalienable Rights of the Preborn. I'm just going to give you a summary of it. What has happened of late is a lot of people think that we're just being just, we're being fair by our so-called support of women's rights and women's reproductive rights in particular. And I want to straighten that out and just talk about the rights of the preborn, which are being violated in a fashion never before dreamt of. Millions and millions of children are being aborted, and I think this is a violation of inalienable rights tantamount to the Dred Scott versus Sanford decision. Let's take a look first at what science has done for us, and then take a look at what inalienable rights theory has always done throughout the last 800 years. First, what does science say about the preborn? What science says essentially is the following. Fertilization is the point at which a new, unique human being comes into existence. Are there biologists who disagree with this? Yes. But 96% of biologists, we're talking here about almost 6,000 professional biologists internationally on the level of PhDs, all agree, 96%, that fertilization is the moment at which a new, unique, substantially whole human being comes into existence. Point number two, why do they believe this? They believe it, number one, because the human genome that is present at the stage of the single-celled zygote. The single-celled zygote is the moment of fertilization, right? The gametes coming together, etc. The main thing is, at that very moment where you have one single cell, the genome has all the instructions that are necessary for all of the cell divisions that will be taking place, not just during pregnancy, but throughout the course of a human being's existence, long after pregnancy, etc. That is a very telling sign for most international biologists. Number three, the human zygote itself. The human zygote, even though it's a single cell, it's a very unique kind of cell. It's kind of an omnipotent cell. It's a totipotent cell. It can become any kind of cell in a human body, and it can become that cell according to the genetic instructions that it has. Hence, that one cell will be the origin of every single cell of a human body, of a human being's body throughout the entire course of his or her existence. Every cell will be produced by that one cell. And by the way, that one cell will continue to be the unity of all those cells throughout the course of a human being's existence. Now, I know some of you who are doctors out there are going to sleep. But the main thing that's really key is that we understand this. Because to understand this is to know that at that stage, the single-celled zygote, you do have a substantially whole substance. This is a big word. A substantially whole human being at that moment. And what does that mean? Throughout the course of that human being's existence, nothing will be added from the outside of that single-celled zygote with its genome. Nothing will be added to it that will make it more human or that will make it human. It's already human. It's as human as it's gonna get, and nothing's gonna make it more human from outside throughout the rest of the course of its. You say, well, there's more cell divisions. Yep, but all those cell divisions don't make it one iota more human. It's perfectly, completely human at the single-celled zygote stage. Now, why is this so important? I'm going to switch to rights theory now. So off the science here, on to the rights theory. The main thing to remember is there's two kinds of rights. One is called inalienable rights. I'll describe them in a moment. Another are extrinsic rights. Inalienable rights are those that belong to us by our, here's the word, very human nature. Extrinsic rights are the ones that are declared to be rights by the republic in which we live, say through the Constitution, in the Bill of Rights. There you have the constitutional fathers, and then later, of course, later rights after the first 10, you've got declarations that come from later, documents, but mainly you've got our constitutional fathers saying, these are rights which we in this republic recognize and declare to be rights of all citizens of the United States. Citizens. That's not true with inalienable rights. You don't have to be a citizen. With inalienable rights, every human being has them. In virtue, if you believe in God, of the Creator giving them to you, or in virtue, as we say, if you don't believe in God, by the very virtue of their human nature. Where human nature exists, inalienable rights belong. And I'm going to explain why that is. Very, very important. But the main thing that we want to get across to people is that substantially whole human being at the stage of the single-celled zygote and thereafter is as human as it's going to get. In other words, it has human nature. Now, an inalienable right is called a natural right. Inalienable rights attach to human nature, not to any declaration of a court, a legislature, a plebiscite, not to any declaration of anybody, not to any constitutional declaration, any court precedent of it. Nay, no declarations. It belongs to you because you are human. You have human nature. You have inalienable rights. That, of course, is the rock-bottom foundation of everything democratic in the history of the Western world. No question about it. So where you see a human being, you also see inalienable rights. Now, why is this so important? Well, since the time of Francisco Suarez, a Jesuit, who actually coined the words, but now today, obviously, Hugo Grotius borrowed it from Suarez. He was the father of international law. John Locke borrowed it from Grotius, and I don't want to get into history of philosophy. The main thing I want you to see is Jefferson and the United Nations Declaration on Human Rights. All of them use the same language because it avoids a tyranny of the majority. Why is it that 51% of our people here cannot outvote the right to life and liberty of the other 49% of people that we don't like? Because the other 49% have inalienable rights that belong to them by their very nature. And this republic is sworn to defend those inalienable rights. And it's not just this republic. All republics, starting with the time of St. Augustine, right? From St. Augustine, I mean, we see it in just about every political philosopher. We see it in John Locke. We see it in Hugo Grotius. We see it in Edmund Burke. And we see that the proclamation, it goes even, Martin Luther King is quoting it in the letter from the Birmingham jail. Mahatma Gandhi is quoting the very same thing. A passage from Augustine that is so utterly important, it grounded practically everything in the history of law. What did he say? An unjust law is no law at all. In other words, law is responsible to justice. And if a positive law made by a legislature is not just, if it is not going to serve the good of the people, by their very nature human, then it's not a law. And whoever passes such a law delegitimizes him or herself. Now, I know I complicated it, but the one thing I want you to see, though, is inalienable rights we have always acknowledged in our republic, Inalienable rights belong to every being of human nature, every human being, substantially whole human being. Because every substantially whole human being is not going to become any more human. It's got a human nature. Now, the second thing then is, so what is an inalienable right, and why isn't every right an inalienable right? An inalienable right is one that we have to give to one another in order for a person to be human or act like a human being. So, do you need the right to life in order to be human or act like a human being? Kinda. If you're dead, you don't have to worry about acting like a human being. Do we need self-governance or the right to liberty? Of course. That's who we are. We're free beings. We're intelligent beings. We need self-governance. Absolutely. Freedom. We need property in order to avoid being indentured servants. We need all of these things. Okay, so these four rights are important. Do I need, is abortion necessary for me to be human or act like a human being? Do I have to have an abortion to be human? Obviously not. Therefore, abortion is not an inalienable right. Do I need a cell phone in order to be human? Well, some of my nieces might say it. But the main thing is, in as much as you really don't need it to act like a human being, you don't have no inalienable right to a cell phone. And by the way, the same distinction was made after Dred Scott versus Sanford, which allowed the enslavement of black human beings before the Civil War. They forgot all about inalienable rights, I might add. But the main thing to remember is, do you need to have slaves to be human or act like a human being? Obviously not. So these things are not inalienable rights. But let's be clear. Inalienable rights, life, liberty, property, and the pursuit of happiness. That means to make for you and yourself a better future. Those four things for sure. And if I deny that of you, I commit the most heinous harm to you. You, the human being, I am now going to I'm going to prohibit you from ever being human. That's the most fundamental injustice you can have. I'm going to take away your capacity to be human or act like a human being. That is such a grave injustice. All of our founding fathers, all of John Locke and Hugo Grotius and Thomas Jefferson and Benjamin Franklin and the United Nations, Jacques Maritain and Arthur, etc. All of these fellows are all saying one thing. Inalienable rights belong to everybody of human nature. And those who say otherwise are junking justice. They are literally trashing justice. And for the popular culture to claim the moral high ground and say that abortion is a matter of reproductive rights of the women, acting as if the preborn human being was a substantially whole human being. He is or she is, has a human nature and therefore inalienable rights. This is crazy. This is crazy making. It's so fundamentally unjust. We can't allow the popular culture to claim the moral high ground anymore. The Catholic Church is defending the rights of the preborn. They're the ones that are defending inalienable rights. They're the ones that are defending fundamental justice. Okay, I got excited. But the main thing is, I want you to see very clearly, this is an important matter for sure. Okay. Okay, thank you. So let me just progress to three other points, and you'll see my point and why the Catholic Church is the light of justice in this world. The first thing to notice with inalienable rights, the idea, since an unjust law is no law at all, if you violate an inalienable right, just follow my logic, you are being grossly unjust, fundamentally unjust to some human being or to some group of human beings that are innocent. They don't deserve to have this done to them. If you do that, that becomes, and if it's sanctioned by law, then of course it's an unjust law. And this is what we have to keep. Dodge is going to help us. Yeah, turn back to the States, and a lot of babies are going to be saved. But the inalienable rights of preborn human beings still up for question. These substantially whole human beings with a human nature, their inalienable rights are being violated, and the church is the only one defending it. So the point, of course, that I'm trying to say is, Don't allow anybody to say that that is a just law. It's fundamentally unjust. It's a fundamental violation of inalienable rights, which is always fundamentally unjust. And an unjust law is no law at all. The whole history of political philosophy is at least in unanimity on this statement. So, that being the case, then we got to stop this unjust law. And we should stop it right now in the next election. You know, vote for candidates who are pro-life. I say this out here and I make a political statement, but I'm not telling you which candidate to vote for. Just vote for the pro-life one. Stop the injustice. The key thing, again, too, there's a fake distinction between personhood and substantially whole human being with a human nature. This personhood versus human being distinction has been proffered by what other people? Let's say the European slave trade early on, that black African slave trade. And how about other ones? Yes, the enslavement of the Indians in the New World. All of these things were done convenient. And Dred Scott versus Sanford, our great decision where the Supreme Court of the United States declared that because black human beings have no constitutionally guaranteed rights, therefore the dominant race, namely the white race, has the capacity to enslave the inferior one. Now you say, well, that couldn't be in Supreme Court precedent. Oh, yes, it is. And there it is enshrined that the superior race can enslave the inferior race. Now you think to yourself, wow, how could this happen? I mean, what do you mean they couldn't find any constitutionally guaranteed rights for black people who came over, quote unquote, from the decision as inferior beings? Oh, well, there were no constitutional rights. We're reading the Constitution, nothing in there about black Americans, nothing in there about preborns. Same logic was used in Roe versus Wade. So I don't want to get too far down into the weeds. I just want you to see that the denial of constitutional rights are not the only kind of rights that exist. Constitutional rights are extrinsic rights. It's the inalienable rights that are always forgotten. And when the inalienable rights of human beings are forgotten, always we see this little distinction between there are people who are human beings, but they're not persons. Persons is a sneaky code for saying that you are not deserving of protection under the law. So there's this idea that certain human beings are not deserving. Black human beings are not. Indian human beings are not deserving of protection under the law. Preborn human beings are not deserving of protection under the law. But if they have inalienable rights, they must be deserving of protection under the law. Who cares whether the Constitution explicitized it or not? The point is, it's a complete false argument. It's pure sophistry. The error is an error of omission. They've forgotten about inalienable rights. Our founding fathers are rolling over in their graves. But the main thing is, at the end of the day, we as Catholics need to defend those rights because an unjust law is no law at all, and we want to stop the injustice. And I have this all mapped out for you. If you just go to majacenter.com, go to my declaration on the inalienable rights of the preborn. I make the case and cite, by the way, all of the references for the science and the inalienable rights theory. At the end of the day, the Catholic Church is right. It's the Catholic Church which is the light of justice in the world. It is the Catholic Church that has stuck with the program that, of course, the popular culture tried to blow by and suddenly declare that they had the moral high ground by depriving the preborn of their inalienable rights, just like we saw prior to the Civil War, huge groups of people sweeping aside the same inalienable rights to enslave black people, saying that, oh yes, they're human beings, but they're not persons deserving of protection under the law, which of course violates their inalienable rights and unjust law. It should have been stopped, and it was stopped, thank God. Let's stop this one too. All right, thank you. Thank you. And I kind of got carried away on that, so I'm going to kind of race through the women's health issue. Again, the popular culture has claimed the moral high ground yet again. And of course, we are against the Catholic Church, against reproductive rights for women, on and on and on and on. Let's just take a look at whether abortion really does promote women's health or whether it doesn't. Going back to the facts, you can get this right on Cambridge University's website. You can get it on, the British Journal of Psychiatry. Priscilla Coleman, Dr. Priscilla Coleman, she basically did a study of 750,000 women. This is a significant sample. So I think we're okay on the sample size here. So 750,000 women, and she came up with the following conclusions, which are substantiated in peer-reviewed medical journals. And as I said, you can get the whole thing on Cambridge University website. Number one, women who had abortions had an 81% higher risk of significant emotional health problems post-factum when compared with women who did not have an abortion. Hello? 81% higher risk of having significant emotional health problems if you have an abortion versus if you don't. You get my point. How about this statistic she found? That 4.1 times, so women who had an abortion had a 4.1 times higher rate of suicides than those who brought their babies to term or those who did not get pregnant. So that's like 400%. That's bad. You don't want a 4 times increase in suicide rates. That's not good for women's health. Let's take a look at the next one. A 2.5 times increase in women who had an abortion had a 2.5 times increase in suicidal contemplation. A 2.1 times increase in alcoholism and drug abuse. A 1.4 times increase in depression, and a 1.3 times increase in anxiety. Hello. I mean, I rest my case. It's terrible. And abortion is absolutely terrible for women's health. There is such a strong bond between that baby and her mother that the Guttmacher Institute refuses to acknowledge. It is such a strong bond that when you reach in there and say, "Doctor, I don't even want to see any of this. I just want to take the pill. I'll just flush the baby in the toilet. Nothing's going to happen. Don't want any emotional." You're going to get emotional consequences. There's an 81% chance you're going to get higher emotional consequences. Please share this with everybody you know. I mean, it's just the myth continues. Coleman's study, I think, is the gold standard. Please let people know that this is not good for women's health. It actually is very shattering, and the grief can last for years. That's why you have Rachel's Vineyard. You have so many of these great institutes that are devoted to helping postmortem grieving of these mothers after the fact. But I must proceed. I'm just trying to do, like a survey, but there's a lot of good data out there, and there's a lot of other surveys besides Priscilla Coleman's that back this up. Let's go to the third area. Big controversy, transgenderism. Catholic Church, once again, we're the villains. Popular cultures claim the moral high ground, right? Catholic Church hates transgenders. Catholic Church marginalizes transgenders, et cetera, et cetera. We've all heard this stuff. I mean, I actually had several students say, "Well, why does the Catholic Church hate transgenders?" I mean, literally was asking class. I just said, here's my quote, and here's what we have to as Catholics insist on. The Catholic Church doesn't hate or marginalize any people. They've never hated or marginalized transgender people. The Catholic Church is in serious disagreement with transgenderism. The idea of transgenderism, which has now become an ideology of transgenderism. I just was at the Catholic Medical Association. I just saw these two panels of people who are detransitioning, but I'll get to that in a moment. I mean, holy mackerel. You'll see the injustice of transgenderism in a moment. The Catholic Church is really defending the rights of these people. And so let me just proceed really quickly. First thing to notice is that 5 countries that were forerunners of transgenderism have shifted their position almost entirely, radically. That's Great Britain, or United Kingdom, really, and that's Sweden, Finland, now Norway, and now France have added themselves to the equation. Now, these were the forerunners, along with the United States, make no mistake about it, were the forerunners, and they have all said now that the risks and harms, the significant risks and harms, far outweigh any benefits of gender-affirming care. Gender-affirming care begins when hormones of the opposite sex of those that your biological sex are administered to you. So, not to you, but to the person involved. So the main thing is clear. What we're seeing then is, whoa, all these countries are turning on a dime and now prohibiting. And the new CAST study that just came out of Great Britain this year, it's free online. You just have to read this study. I mean, it blows apart the myth that transgenders, gender-confused people, prior to getting gender-affirming care, are suicidal, right? This is a big myth that's out there. Took the big, dynamite and just exploded the entire myth. You ought to see what they say about the weakness of the evidence in that study. But not just that, they're actually exposing now all of the risks to these people, all of the subsequent harms that are being done to. Let's talk about those harms for just 1 minute. So let's suppose somebody decides, well, first of all, let's take a clue here. How come the United States is holding out? Why are they, we now have at least 7 major studies that have been done that have found that, any kind of gender-affirming care, like receiving hormones opposite of your biological sex, is really harmful to you. Why aren't we acting on these? Why aren't we doing anything? Why are we going to do yet another study in the United States? Because, the United States studies are so much more special. They're so much better than those other foreign studies that, of course, were done exceedingly well and maybe with a lot less politics. But the main thing, again, is it's political. It's money. Follow the money, follow the politics, follow the ideology. That's why we're continuing to harm these kids. And we got to stop the injustice. It's medically unethical to do this. Here's why. First reason, people are switching. This, by the way, I put the little footnotes there if you want the studies. If you write to spitzer@magicenter.com, I'll send you these PowerPoints. And you can get all these studies. And I'll send you a whole lot more, too. By the way, also, there's a book called Moral Wisdom of the Catholic Church. And actually, I'm going to be selling it right after the talk here. So, but you can get it there. But you can get it for free by just asking me for the PowerPoints. All right. Now, okay, 30. All right. So the main thing to look at, first of all, is, get this, a 20 times increase in suicides 10 years after transgender surgery, that sexual reassignment surgery, is performed. 20 times. This was a 30-year Swedish study. It's a good longitudinal study. By the way, there's lots of studies out there about transgenders. New York Times, whatever, doing a study. And we asked 6 months after their transgender surgery, when the placebo effect is still going on, we just asked these people, how do you feel about your surgery? I feel really good. It's the best thing that I ever did. And that's it. This is the end of the survey. That survey is worthless. It's not objective. It's based on the subjective feelings of the participant, who is highly biased and under the influence of placebo effect and other effects. Secondly, it's not only not objective, it basically is a study that is so short-term, you can't see the long-term harms and effects. Notice what the Swedish study found. 10 years after the sexual reassignment surgery, then when the regrets are high, you have a 20 times increase in suicide rates. When you're up at that level, you're talking like, almost 19% of that population is actually committing suicide. Hello? This is bad. This is a terrible injustice because none of this is told to those kids who are, gender confused. They have gender dysphoria. They walk in and they are literally roped into the line of, this is what's going to help you. You won't want to have these feelings. You're not going to have these feelings anymore. Just go ahead and do it, and you can get the main point. When you get 10 years out, they should be saying, oh, by the way, you do have a 20 times increase in your suicide rate because you will be very disappointed. You can't detransition when you find that you get buyer's remorse in addition to a return of all the anxieties that produce the gender confusion. And just saying to you, life's going to be pretty miserable after that. You're going to have a long-standing emotional health problem going forward. They forget to tell them that. This is really important information. Anybody. Let's take a look at the mortality rates. This is a 50-year Dutch study that was done under Den Hager. And by the way, these things are published in really good peer-reviewed journals. Like this one's published in the Lancet. There's the reference for you to the study. It's a 50-year study. The mortality rates, essentially, of people who just get gender-affirming care. They don't get a sexual reassignment surgery. Just receiving hormones of the opposite gender. Their mortality rate goes up to between 2 to 3 times. So you can see the 2 times is when you have a transgender woman, that is to say a biological man who became, transitioned. You can see that their mortality rate is 2 times higher than a transgender man, and you can see that it's 3 times higher than a biological woman. So all I'm telling you is mortality rate 2 to 3 times higher. Don't you think people should be told this before they go into any transition? I think so. In fact, if I were a government and I saw a medical procedure where there was 20 times a higher rate of suicide and 3 times higher rate of mortality for all reasons, I would probably say, FDA, shouldn't you be worried about this? This is not a good medical practice. It is not ethical. And to not inform the parents and to not inform these kids, this is bad practice. The European countries are right. We're dead wrong. We're dead unethical. And we just let the Catholic Church stand up for the rights of these transgender, these gender-confused people. I just, give a few other details, and I got to go into other topics. But the main thing to notice, too, is there's no biological basis for, transgender, the gender confusion. Man trapped in a woman's body, woman trapped in a man's body. Just no basis. That was two Johns Hopkins University professors. The similar thing is the vast majority of kids, if left to themselves and not encouraged to move toward a transgender solution or sexual reassignment surgery, if they're not encouraged, if they're just left to themselves, they will revert back to their biological sex. Some of them will need help from therapy, but by and large, a lot of them will not. Okay, so what's the real reasons for gender confusion? It's not man being trapped in a woman's body, woman being trapped in a man's body. That's not what it is. There's about 4 or 5 different ones that are mentioned by the Cass study in the United Kingdom, but the 3 most prevalent ones are physical and sexual abuse as children. 40% to 55% had some form of sexual or physical abuse. This is combined oftentimes with anxiety in the household. So there's a tremendous amount of anxiety in the household, and then there's transference that's associated with that. So the little boy thinks, why is my parents always angry all the time, and man, so forth and so on. I know, because they wanted a girl, and here I am, a boy. The solution to the problem and getting the whole household fixed up and happy again is if I become a girl. And you think, well, who does that? Kids! Kids do it. Sorry. I shouldn't shout, but, the point is pretty clear. Again, homosexual feelings, latent homosexual feelings can also be responsible, etc. So there are good studies that have been done on this. There's a wonderful study in the Catholic Bioethics Institute by a guy named Richard Fitzgibbons, Dr. Richard Fitzgibbons et al., and you can see all of that. And I have a series of other sources there for you to read from the Johns Hopkins folks, etc. Anyway, what's the Catholic Church? Popular culture is not proclaiming justice. They shouldn't. They don't deserve the moral high ground. The Catholic Church is the one that's trying to protect, medical ethics and trying to protect the rights of these. They should be fully informed of what's going to happen and what's likely to happen, etc. Anyway, I've bloviated sufficiently. Let's go to the next thing, physician-assisted suicide. Here we have the church once again, the popular culture claiming the moral high ground once again. And what do they say of the Catholic Church? Oh, they just want to get involved in my autonomous decision to make, my own choices. And the Catholic Church is interfering. Just keep quiet and just shut up and let the popular culture take the mantle of justice onto itself. Well, ladies and gentlemen, here's why physician-assisted suicide is wrong. First and foremost, there's an old theory that goes back to John Locke. My rights to swing my fist stop where your face begins. Now, you think to yourself, well, why is that so important? Because you can't give an option or a freedom to somebody that will endanger or create a burden, especially a burden to die, for another person or group of persons. That is not a good law. That is an unjust law, which is no law at all. Now, let's take a look at 5 new victim classes. And you think to yourself, you mean these victim classes weren't around before assisted suicide? That's what I'm saying. They weren't around, and now we decided to give everybody the option to kill themselves medically. And so now we have created these new victim classes. And there have been a lot of people who have been talking about, I'm just going to give you the tip of the iceberg. Number 1, there is the problem of both well-meaning and ill-meaning relatives, friends, and doctors. What do I mean by that? I mean that people are pushing people to commit suicide who would otherwise not request it. So in other words, they're going in and they're going, Mom, I think it's over now. You're costing us a whole lot of money from our inheritance. I'm sorry to say this, but wouldn't you feel better about yourself if you just took this? It's $1.20 prescription. You just take it right now and, end our misery and yours too. And of course, that's wrong. You shouldn't be pushing people into suicide who don't want it. Yet, does this actually happen in states where assisted suicide has been passed? Oh, yeah. I mean, the controls on assisted suicide are so loosey-goosey. Let me tell you, you can go in there with practically any kind of a diagnosis and get a prescription. There's this Kate Cheney. It's just one case among really hundreds of them that have been written up in the medical literature. But Kate Cheney is just one perfect example. Her daughter comes, and says, Mom, I'd like you to commit suicide and, help me out here. Mom goes, I don't think I want to right now. Thank you, dear. And so, of course, the next thing she does is she goes physician shopping. So she goes to Kate's physician, and she says, I'd like, you to, offer a prescription, help her die. And the doctor, I know your mother. I've been treating her for 20 years. She doesn't want to commit suicide. Stop it. I'm not going to write that prescription. But undaunted, she proceeded. So, of course, she goes to a psychiatrist who says the same thing, Look, I can't prescribe this. The evidence of your mom's wanting suicide is just almost nil. I won't do it. Finally, she goes to a psychologist, get this, working for an insurance company. Oy vey. At this point, you're looking, and of course, what does he do? He writes the prescription. And, of course, she goes into old Kate's room, muscles her into taking the prescription, end of story. Does this happen? All the time. It's a problem We have created a duty to die for people who otherwise don't want it, and we're producing this new burden on people, supposedly to give other people an option. An unjust law, if ever there was one, which is no law at all. Let's go to the second victim class. We know that when people get a diagnosis, right, there's, impending death. You got cancer, you might have 2 years, you might have 6 months, whatever you got, but you got cancer and it looks pretty bad, but you might go through a treatment, but right now we're unsure whether that's going to help you. Do people become suicidal when they hear this? Yes, they do. It's like you just dropped the atomic bomb on this person. If they don't have philosophical objections, religious objections, they don't have relatives around to support them, they can be pressured by doctors and others to commit suicide, or they themselves can say, it's called reversible suicide, right? Kubler-Ross and several other people studied this over a long period of time. They will reverse their suicide requests, eventually a good part of them. But when, and this is from Dr. Kathleen Foley, was probably one of the most noted, at Sloan Kettering, one of the most noted pain and symptom management specialists. Basically, Foley said in one of our articles, I have the little quote up there for you, that basically when we treat the depression and the pain associated with a terminal diagnosis adequately, the suicide request is almost always reversed. People, when they're not desperate, when they come to their senses, when they think, I want to spend these last precious moments with my children or my friends, or I got to do some stuff, mend some fences, I got to do this or that, right? When we get them into that mode, the main thing to notice is that they will reverse their suicide requests. However, if you push them when they get the terminal diagnosis and they have not thought about it, now, you bring in the psychologist, okay, we don't want to encourage you, but, hurry up and, tell your psychologist, why you would like to commit suicide. Do I want to commit suicide? I don't know. But anyway, the point is no treatment is being offered ahead of time. It is not required that you treat the depression and pain. And therefore, so many of these requests are made when the person is down and out. It's unjust, and an unjust law is no law at all. Let's go to the third victim class, the insurance stuff. Barbara Wagner, there's a ton of these cases, that are out there. And the main thing with Barbara Wagner, for example, is that, previously her cancer was being treated, right? This is the state of Washington. And her case was being treated, and her pain was being managed for her cancer treatments by the insurance companies. When assisted suicide passed, they switched that policy and told Barbara, well, your pain protocol and your treatment is no longer covered by the policy, but you can have assisted suicide. We will cover that for you. And Wagner is telling the Seattle Times, gee, they'll pay for me to die, but they won't pay for me to live because it's a lot cheaper for me to get out of the way. There you go. And the more states that pass this, mark my words, people, if they can't get to another state fast enough, or they can get some coverage, in a state that doesn't permit assisted suicide, they could easily be either persuaded to take assisted suicide, or they're going to be let go to die because there's no treatment now available. I'll just simply say we're going to have two classes of citizens, those who can afford the big policies that will cover treatments of various kinds, and the state policies which won't, for the states that have the assisted suicide, that won't. And you're going to see a lot more people dying of assisted suicide. I debated this guy. I'm not going to get into that. Okay. The main thing, though, is is a third victim class. A fourth victim class is obviously the disabled. Right now, disabled people, right? Even, I know that, blindness, you say, well, you have a disability. Do you notice anything different? Of course I notice something different. Like if I come in with an assistant into the airport, they always talk to him as if I've lost my intelligence by becoming blind. It's like, oh, well, I'm here too. I could make a decision, and so forth. Have you ever had, this is just blind guy thing, but have you ever had people, oh, you're blind? And then they start talking to you really loud, and you go, no, the problem's not deafness, but, I'm okay there, but you look at that, and of course people treat you differently. Now, people, disabled people, they notice this, right? They say, well, I'm kind of, people look at me differently. Maybe they think my life is not worth living. Maybe because I need some help going to the restroom. Maybe then my life really, maybe it's better for me to get out of the way, and just sort of, limp off into the sunset and being that I'm so inferior that, I don't want to be a burden to anyone, my relatives. And, if you don't have religious or, philosophical objections to the contrary, they're prime candidates for suicide. Do you know why every single solitary disabilities rights group, every one of them, disabilities assistance group, is against assisted suicide, not just in this country, but internationally? Because of that. Our constituency is the one that's going to be forced to die because they need help going to the restroom or whatever. That is bad. That's an unjust law. And an unjust law is no law at all. Thank you so much, and I will proceed. Now, I just want to shift gears on you. I'm sorry if I'm going a little fast, but what I want you to see, though, is the Catholic Church. What do you mean we're like the criminals of the Western world, and the popular culture, almost like, the French Revolution, they're sitting there, decapitating all these people right and left, in the reign of terror, right? And you look at that and you go, yeah, Catholic Church is getting, emotional reign of terror right now. And we don't deserve it. The main thing I want to say is Catholic Church has been defending the rights of people. I just want to take just one other thing I want to say, and that is involuntary euthanasia. Every time you have an increase in physician-assisted suicide, you will always get involuntary euthanasia following in its wake. All those statistics are there on the sheet, on the slides there, and you can see that where, if you have like 2,400 assisted suicide requests, you can be sure that 1,000 additional involuntary euthanasia things will happen. You can be sure at the same time, involuntary withdrawals from medical assistance are going to happen. Thousands of them will happen, and this is the experience not just of Holland, the Netherlands, but of Belgium as well, and Luxembourg. This is a constant. Where there is physician-assisted suicide, always the promise, this will always be done in the best possible way, full information. Wrong, wrong, wrong. It is not so at all. And thank you. And so we can see that the... Thank you. We can see that this is highly problematic. Okay, so I'll leave it at that and just say, let's reverse this. No more physician-assisted suicide laws. One person's option cannot become 5 victim classes worth of new burdens to die. It's just terribly wrong. It comes under, it's so diabolical. It looks so liberating, and it's so oppressive. And it is so suicidal, and it's wrong. Okay, let me shift gears just to the sexual health thing for just a moment. Ordinarily, if I were doing a whole talk on the sexual health thing, I would go ahead and take a look at what the Christian norm for marriage is. but I don't have the time right now. I just want to say that the Catholic Church has always said that Christian sexual expression is reserved for marriage. What marriage? A permanent, exclusive commitment between one man and one woman in the faith, that is to say, in a religious commitment. I want to go through and just talk about the various elements that are involved in this and why it is such wisdom, that this is such covenant love. This is the kind of covenant love that can produce emotional intimacy, right? This is a huge bond of marriage. This is a kind of covenant love. Even if there are hard times and you just want to say to your spouse some days, you rat, right? I mean, the main thing, though, is the emotional intimacy and the time given and the religious dimension hold the fabric of the marriage together, not just for the kids, but for the couple themselves to become that building block of society and the building block of the church. That's what we're after. So in other words, if you have permanent and exclusive commitment, you have a gigantic possibility of not only getting emotional intimacy, a great bond, of generativity, that is to say, overflowing into children or overflowing into, doing good, the couple doing good for others, the couple, as 1 + 1 = 5 synergy, right, et cetera. You see the same thing, with the capacity for self-sacrifice, to serve the other. You see, to serve the children, even to serve society and the church. You can see that this is the best thing that ever happened, not only to the church, but to society itself, this great marriage covenant. So what can we expect if we start deviating from permanent and exclusive commitment that really treasures sexuality as an expression of generative love, etc.? What happens when we start deviating from that? I'm just going to give you some statistics, and I know rolling off statistics is not important, but you can grab these, just ask me for the PowerPoints, and you can discuss this with people. But here's typically what happens. So what happened in 1962, we basically have, the sexual revolution comes not just with the advent of the birth control pill, but a lot of these sexual studies, Masters and Johnsons and so forth and so on, so-called objective physical studies of sexuality. This, releases a whole, panoply of, different societal, reverberations that wind up being, Haight-Ashbury and, the culture of love, LUV. So, I mean, this took place in just such a rapid succession. But let's take a look at the consequences of the sexual revolution. And it's not just the fact that, the autonomy as an end in itself has become, almost a principle rather than self-sacrifice in service of the other. But now, it's me and what I can get, an ego comparative advantage. I've talked about this as level 2 and level 1. Okay, what's the consequences? Let's take a look at the number of marriages. And what we're looking at here is per 1,000 people. So in 1960, basically, I think you had, it was 15 marriages per 1,000 or something of that nature. It's down to 7, per 1,000 in a year, et cetera. So now that's less than half. So the marriage rate per 1,000 is 1/2 of what it used to be prior to the beginning of the sexual revolution. Secondly, divorce rate. The divorce rate has doubled since the advent of the sexual revolution, right across the board per 1,000. So when you start looking at it, basically, it's not just that the marriage rate is in half, but married couples with that kind of emotional intimacy and bonding and generativity, self-sacrifice, and a religious conviction and objective moral conviction, that those couples have been reduced dramatically. We're literally at a level that those couples that exist today are about 1/5 of what they used to be. This is horrible for society. Oh, yes, cohabitation is way up and a variety of other things. But I'm just telling you, This is not a good consequence. What about forcible rapes? Well, I'm not going to get into that too much, but forcible rapes have increased since the beginning of the sexual revolution 5 times. Now, the reporting of a rape has gone up 34%. So that's not the explanation. It's we're out of control in sexual expression, which has been divorced from commitment, from emotional intimacy, from permanence, etc. I just leave it at that. I'll just take a look. I want to take a look quickly at homosexual lifestyle. I also want to take a look at cohabitation. I bring this up not because I want to pick on homosexuals. I'm talking about homosexual lifestyle. What is happening in it and what is the emotional health consequence? I am not picking on cohabitating couples. I know huge numbers of our young people are cohabitating. I know this. I know out of college, and it's getting considerably greater. But the main thing right now to discuss is, okay, let's go to homosexual lifestyle for just a moment. The difficulty, in a nutshell, is there is more concern for commitment in homosexual lifestyles today than there ever was, because I think that is now pursued as an objective. However, let's take a look at this Van de Ven study. And you can see that this really is the tip of the iceberg of the number of sexual partners, which I think is the problem. So once you divorce sexuality from permanent, exclusive, committed love, toward the objectives that I mentioned, what winds up happening is the number of sexual partners increases dramatically. Basically, in our culture today, having 7 sexual partners over a lifetime for heterosexuals is pretty normal. You can almost bet that 5.7 out of those 7 were essentially before the marriage. So still, marriage does have a lot of propensity toward monogamy, but I must tell you, the extramarital affairs have really gone up in numbers. Again, the divorcing of sexual expression from premarital commitment. But let me get to my point. So what is the modal norm? The modal range of sexual partners, at least in the Van de Ven studies around the turn of the century, around 2000, I think 1998 or whatever it was. In that time, it was between 100 to 500 partners. Now, what is the main thing to see about having that number of sexual partners? No time for emotional intimacy to develop. No time for generativity to develop after you really know the person, right? You get through the first 2 stages of attraction and affection and so forth, and then you really get to know the rat. No, just kidding. I mean, you don't have that, gravitas yet. You need time to get to that place where, obviously there's a pushback period, and then you overcome the pushback period, and you decide that you're going to invest in this person despite the fact they have weaknesses and so forth and so on. You realize that, and of course they can't be perfect love and perfect responsiveness and a perfect availability and perfect understanding and perfect home for you, because they're human. So what's the key point? Well, if you don't have that strong bonding force, if you don't have the generativity, if you don't have the commitment towards self-sacrifice for the good of the other and the good of the family, et cetera, if you have real weakness in that area, what can you expect? You're going to feel totally unsupported in your relationships. And what happens when people feel, lots of sex, lots of pleasure, but no support? No real substance of friendship, no real substance of the bond of intimacy, no real substance of generativity and doing things of common cause together, not just for the kids, but for the kingdom of God and for others. Right? The substance is gone. What can we expect to find in terms of emotional health? A 3 times increase in depression rates. Homosexual men compared to heterosexual men. 3 times increase. a 5 times increase in panic disorders, compared, two populations compared. I believe it is a 3.5 times increase in substance abuse. Again, a 2.5 times increase in major psychiatric disorders. This is looking not that good. The main thing, though, is suicidal ideation. Look at that. 5 to 7 times higher. Every one of these polls comes from the Netherlands. Just saying, in a place that is very, very friendly to homosexual lifestyle, and you would expect that there would be a significant difference between being in countries that are not friendly versus countries that are friendly, and there are none. These, I'm just quoting right out of Fitzgibbon's here, and I don't have the time to get the exact quote. The main thing, though, is you've got 40% of that population has actively considered suicide. What does that mean to me? It is not an emotionally healthy lifestyle. Why? Because if those homosexual couples are not living in that kind of an attempt anyway for permanent exclusive commitment, you're going to find that the number of sexual partners is just going to keep attacking that intimacy, that generativity, that support of other people, that sense of support and being, I sacrifice for them, but they sacrifice for me too, and we sacrifice for the whole, for the kids. There's not that sense, I have to tell you, let's look at religion and homosexual lifestyle. It's cut in half compared with the heterosexual population. I'm not quoting Spitzer's poll here. This is the Pew survey on this that I think took place in 2010 or 2012 or whatever it was. The main thing, though, in that poll, they found that there was double the number of people living in homosexual lifestyle that considered themselves atheists. They were 1.6 times less likely to participate in religious ceremonies. Half the rate of participation in Bible study, half the rate in participation in it's not good for spiritual life. It's just simply not good for spiritual life. The lifestyle itself is something, almost resistant to religion, resistant to generativity, resistant to emotional intimacy. I'm not picking on any homosexual person. I don't want to. It's the lifestyle that I'm picking on. And I'm picking on it because I think it's really, really bad for people. And I just wish that, the whole idea of encouraging people to come out, the whole idea of be yourself, that's what really matters. The whole idea should be, what is the way to optimize your emotional health? What's the way to optimize your spiritual health? What's the way to optimize your life? What's the way to optimize, the values and help you to get the values that you think will make life worth living, etc. That's my view, and all I can say is the Catholic Church is onto something. That lifestyle has real difficulties, and St. Paul knew it, and Jesus knew it. I'll just leave it there. How much? Wrap it up. Okay, good. Sorry. Okay. Can you stand one more thing on cohabitation, or just skip it? Okay, cohabitation in a nutshell. I'll just give it to you. Again, what's the great urban myth, right? The great urban myth is, if you have time to practice, that's going to make the marriage so much better. Wrongo bongo. Here's what really happens. Again, I hate to keep spewing these statistics at you, but what really happens is in cohabiting relationships, you wind up getting far more stress that is induced. You wind up getting much more infighting. And you say, well, why is that? Because that same thing that Jesus and the church, permanent, exclusive commitment, within the context of, generative family that's religious, and all of that emotional bonding that happens, it gets you through the tough times. It gets you through the challenges. And so, again, to make a very long story short, you can see that the stress rate increases the longer the cohabitation. By the way, this is the very good Rosler and Rosenfeld studies. Very good. And so you can see that the stress levels are going way up. What's the second reason that cohabitation bad? Because as the longer a couple cohabitates, their religious commitment declines. It's just, what are the two great pillars of marriage that make for long-lasting relationships, satisfying relationships in marriage that are good for kids and good for the culture and good for the kingdom of God? What are the two pillars? Number one, the desire and commitment for permanent, exclusive relationship with that person for the good of all. Second, most important, is religion. Yep. Peyton was right. The couple that prays together stays together. It's absolutely true. 7 big university studies show this. The couples that are religious in orientation, they pray together, etc., they definitely have more satisfying marriage. They definitely have more common cause, more generativity in their marriages, long-lasting marriages, etc. So cohabitation is a triple strike. It basically gets you, first of all, the stress levels, the fighting levels without the emotional intimacy to mediate, without the religion to mediate, bad news. Then, of course, the religion, which is so important to the longevity and satisfaction in marriage, that's going down the drain. And when it goes down the drain, it's taking out this huge element of satisfaction and long-lasting marriages, plummeting things toward divorce. Very bad, by the way, for children. I'll just point that out. And the Thornton studies on the reciprocal relationship between religion and marriage is really instrumental, because at the end he says cohabitation works against that reciprocal relationship between marriage and religion. So even if a cohabiting relationship moves toward marriage, if it moves toward marriage way late, like 10 years after the cohabiting relationship began, I mean, basically the religion is snuffed, and it really takes the guts out of the power of religion to affect the marriage for the long term. Anyway, I've bloviated enough, and I've kept certainly, I went into a lot of stuff that was maybe too technical, but the main thing I do want to say is, please defend the Catholic Church. When you go to the election coming forward, please look for pro-life candidates. Please look for people who are just against this transgender, maniacal stuff that the European countries have rejected. Please look for, candidates who are just against this terrible assisted suicide. And, let's just, hopefully we can get back to a culture that's worthy of us. Our church has defended justice, and it has been wrongly blamed by a popular culture seizing the moral high ground. To the very contrary. Anyway, I leave you with those thoughts, but I'll tell you one thing. Christ is alive in the church and protecting justice and protecting ethics on so many different levels. We can't even begin to believe it. Trust that church, and God bless you all. And thanks so much for your kind attention today. Okay. Oh, thank you so much.